On the day Andrew Zielinski confesses his feelings to the pretty transfer student, everyone thinks I'll break down. They expect me to come running while crying and trying to stop him. I don't show up even after he confesses, though. Andrew has no idea that while he's busy confessing, I'm wearing his roommate's hoodie and sitting on his roommate's bed. I look at his roommate innocently and ask, "How are we going to sleep tonight now that I've wet your bed?" Spencer Lithgow looks away from me as his Adam's apple bobs.
He throws a towel at me.
"Go dry your hair. You can sleep once I've changed the sheets." Andrew Zielinski was planning on confessing his love to the pretty exchange student. He went around and made sure everyone would keep this a secret from me. What he didn't know is that a meddling classmate had informed me long ago. After all, everyone knew I liked Andrew, and it was a dream of mine to marry him. It was love at first sight for Andrew. He had serious feelings for that girl from the start. People assumed I was going to make a huge fuss, cry, throw a fit, or even threaten to hang myself. This kind of drama-filled love triangle was catnip for everyone, basically. So they were all waiting for me to cave and go kick up a stink. Sadly for them, I never made an appearance. Not even after Andrew had successfully professed his feelings. A huge crowd had gathered to watch the proceedings, but was now starting to lose interest. Even Andrew's face was looking a little glum. With one arm around his new girlfriend, he took out his phone. He frowned when he saw that there was not even one call or message. Then he turned to address the crowd.
"Dinner's on me.
Everyone here is invited." The crowd of students shouted with joy hearing this. Finally, I, who had been standing behind a tree, walked out. An eagle-eyed student spotted me and immediately yelled, "It's Kaylee Johnson. Kaylee's here." I knew it. I knew there was no way Kaylee could stay away. Andrew raised his head. The moment he saw me, his lips curled up ever so slightly. I ignored those waiting for a show and walked straight up to Andrew. "Kaylee," said Andrew as he tugged his new girlfriend even closer to him. "You can't force matters of the heart," he said airily. "We've known each other for more than 10 years, so I don't want to be too harsh with my words and sully our previous relationship. I'll still see you as a younger sister, and if you need something, you can still come to me." Then he lowered his voice before adding, "There are a lot of people watching, so don't make a scene."
"Leave. Quickly."
"Andrew." I interrupted him and took a step forward. He frowned again. "Kaylee, behave." I smiled, then removed the bracelet from my wrist and handed it to him. "I came to return this to you." Andrew's face fell upon seeing the bracelet. "What are you playing at, Kaylee? Take this bracelet back and I won't bother you anymore." Andrew fixed his gaze on me, and his voice grew colder. "The money it's worth is nothing to me. If you don't want it, then just throw it away." The moment he finished his sentence, I turned around and threw the bracelet into a nearby trash can. "You can throw away the things I gifted you previously, too." With that, I walked away without sparing him any more glances. Andrew stayed glued to the spot, even after my shadow had disappeared from sight. His expression was still cloudy. A friend, who wanted to appease him, sighed. "Kaylee's just protecting her pride. She's just doggedly holding it in. Just watch, Andrew. She'll regret it before the night even falls. She might even come back to dig through the trash can before we've even left," another said. Andrew chuckled. "She can go ahead and act up however much she wants. If it weren't for the reputation of the two families, who would even bother with her?" All right. Don't be mad. You need to be celebrating tonight. Don't let her ruin your fun." Andrew turned his gaze toward his gorgeous new girlfriend and promptly discarded the thought of the annoying Kaylee from his mind. After all, by tomorrow, he thought I would be acting as if nothing had happened again. He thought I'd be waiting for him at his dorm and pestering him to go to class together like usual. He had already seen similar antics from me in all these years. The rain was pouring down while I was walking along the riverside. I stood under my umbrella in the rain, thinking about the dreams I had a few days ago. In these dreams, I had caused a huge scene when Andrew confessed his love to Sienna Slangdon. I even jumped into this river that very night in order to force him to break up with her. In the end, I nearly lost my life. I was very thankful for these dreams. It felt as if I had been reborn. I could make changes, so I did not end up with the same horrible fate. Finally, on the third try, my call was picked up. I held the phone tightly and held it close to my ear. The name Spencer rolled across the tip of my tongue multiple times before I was able to say it out loud. The rain was still pouring heavily, and it muted the surrounding noises. Only Spencer Lithgow's voice, with a hint of tiredness, rang out. Kaylee?
Spencer?
It's raining heavily right now. I'm stuck by the river and can't get back. Can you come pick me up? The person on the other end of the phone fell silent, and I clutched tightly onto the umbrella. My palm was damp with sweat. In my dreams, it seemed as if Spencer had cried when he took care of my skeletal remains. His tears dripped one by one onto my decomposed body and exposed bones. I could feel the burn of those tears, even through my dreams. Afterward, he would carry a tiny bottle of my ashes with him, and it would remain with him for the rest of his life. A life that he spent by his lonesome as well. I could not help but tear up, and a sob escaped from my throat. Why are you crying? Came Spencer's voice suddenly. It was still the same indifferent tone, with just a hint of exasperation. I never said I wasn't going to get you. Then when are you coming? Wait there. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Okay, I'll wait for you, Spencer. He hung up the call without another word. 15 minutes later, I handed my umbrella to a mother and son pair who were waiting for the rain to stop. So, by the time Spencer arrived, I was already fully drenched. When he came out of his car, his lips were pressed tightly together, and his expression was as icy as a cold winter's morning. I ran my fingers through my matted-down bangs, raised my head, and beamed at him. Spencer, you're so punctual. Kaylee, you might as well die from stupidity. With a stony expression, he tugged on my arm and shoved me into his car before throwing a plush blanket at me. Wipe yourself clean. Don't dirty my car. He peered at me using the rearview mirror, then swiftly turned his car around. Okay, I answered, before obediently wrapping the blanket around myself. I could not help myself and stole a look at him while he was focused on driving. Whenever he had a blank expression, it always appeared as if he was very aloof and unapproachable. There were a lot of girls at our college who liked him, but none dared to let him know their feelings. He was roommates with Andrew. I often went to Andrew's dorm. Every time I went there, Spencer always acted as if he hated me. And like now, even though he came to pick me up, his attitude was still cold and standoffish. When he shoved me into the car earlier, he had not been gentle. My wrist was still aching, and there was even a red ring around it. There was no way anyone could tell that he secretly harbored feelings for me. I slowly lowered my eyes. The events in my dreams were slowly coming true. But now, because of the changes I had made, a lot of things were changing in response, too. In that case, would Spencer still like me? If he did not have those feelings, then would I not just be causing him a lot of trouble by doing all this? Going back to the dorm, Spencer asked while turning around to look at me. My heart skipped a beat. I do not know what came over me, but I answered yes, back to your dorm. Spencer gripped the steering wheel and snorted. Andrew won't be coming back tonight.
I know.
My hands that were clutching the edge of the blanket slowly tightened. I'm not going there for him. The car abruptly pulled over to the side. Spencer turned around to look at me. The iciness in his eyes gave me a chill. Kaylee, don't you dare involve me in your games. I'm not. He stared at me for another beat, then took out his phone.
I'll get you a cab.
You can go back by yourself. Spencer. I bit down on my lip and lunged for his phone. Kaylee. He stared at me, but there was no anger or disgust in his eyes. However, they appeared bottomless, as if they were hiding all sorts of emotions. I was suddenly overcome with an indescribable sadness. Spencer, I don't want to go back to my dorm room.
They'll all laugh at me.
I don't dare to go home either. Can you let me stay in yours for one night? I said in a small voice while hiding his phone behind my back. But if you really hate me and don't want to see me, then never mind. The moment I finished speaking, tears started to fall soundlessly from my eyes. Spencer did not say anything else to me, but he started his car again. The car headed in the direction of the campus. And finally, he parked in front of his dorm. I followed Spencer into his dorm room. He went to the closet to get me a clean hoodie and said, "The bathroom is over there." Spencer was quite tall, so the hoodie was rather big on me. It just about reached my knees like a dress. After a shower, I put the hoodie on and came out with my bare legs showing. Spencer glanced at me before averting his eyes. I walked past Andrew's bed and went to sit on Spencer's. My hair was dripping wet, and soon enough the sheets had turned damp. The fragrance from the shampoo and body gel I had used all smelled of Spencer. In that small place, similar fragrances started to diffuse and swirl, causing an unspeakable sense of romance to burgeon. Spencer grabbed a box of cigarettes and lightly cleared his throat. "I'm going to go smoke," he said as he headed out to the balcony. I studied his bed out of curiosity. The bed sheets and blanket were a light gray color, and everything looked clean. There was a computer and books on the desk. They were also arranged nicely. I was about to go look at the trinkets on his desk when my phone suddenly rang. The name flashing across the screen was none other than Andrew. I did not answer. Soon enough, the phone started ringing again, and it appeared as if the other person had no intention of stopping anytime soon. I simply muted my phone and placed it back into my bag. "Spencer," I yelled out to the balcony. He quickly turned around, put out his cigarette, then walked over. "What's wrong?" I was sitting on the bed and had to lift my head to be able to look at him. Spencer locked eyes with me for 2 seconds, then looked away. However, I managed to catch how his earlobes were turning slightly red. "I've gotten your sheets wet. They can't be slept on now." He glanced at me, then at the wet patches on the sheets. His Adam's apple bobbed forcefully before he turned around and handed me a towel. "Go blow dry your hair first. I'll change the sheets so you can sleep." With that, he went to grab clean sheets from the closet. I clutched onto the towel and could not help but smile while thinking about how his ears turned red earlier. After I finished blow-drying my hair, Spencer had also changed the sheets. "You go ahead and sleep. What about you?" He pulled out his chair, and without even glancing back, he said, "I'll be gaming." "Okay." I sat on his bed, feeling a little disappointed. Spencer was just about to put on his earphones when his phone suddenly rang. He glanced down at the screen, then glanced over at me before picking up the call. "Andrew, what's up?" My heartbeat quickened, and I unconsciously held my breath. "Yes, I'm in the dorm room. You're saying someone saw Kaylee come into our building?" Spencer turned to face me again. Out of desperation, I did not wait for him to finish his sentence. Instead, I walked right over, straddled him, and hooked my arms around his neck. Right when Spencer was about to push me away, I leaned in and whispered right into his ear, "Spencer, tell him I'm not here." My hands, which were still on his neck, could feel his skin suddenly burning up. I could see the veins that were running down his neck popping, while his Adam's apple bobbed vigorously. Even his heartbeat was racing. I tilted my head upward to look at him, while he lowered his eyes to look at me. Deep within the recesses of his eyes, a hint of desire was swirling. "No, I've been here the whole time."
"She's not here."
"Yep, you should ask someone else." With that, Spencer promptly hung up the call. He tossed his phone, then he wrapped his fingers around my waist. He gripped me tight, and then enveloped me in his arms. I suddenly, and very clearly, felt a fiery volcano beneath me. My ears rang loudly, and my first thought was to run away. However, Spencer only held me even tighter. "Kaylee," he rasped. His warm breath fell on my ear and on the side of my neck. I shrank away, wanting to hide, but I shrank back instinctively, wanting to escape the heat of him, but Spencer only tightened his grip around my waist. "Now you're scared?" he asked hoarsely. His voice had lost all of its usual coldness. It sounded rough, strained, almost dangerous. I pressed both palms against his chest. Beneath the thin black t-shirt, his heartbeat was pounding wildly. "I didn't mean to. You climbed onto my lap yourself." My face instantly burned. The room was too small, too quiet. Rain battered the windows outside, while the desk lamp cast a dim glow across the dorm room. His gray sheets still carried the faint scent of detergent and cedarwood. Everything suddenly felt intimate. Spencer stared at me for a long moment before shutting his eyes briefly, as if trying to suppress something. "Kaylee," he said quietly, "do you have any idea what you're doing to me?" I froze. because in all my years of chasing after Andrew, no one had ever looked at me like this before. Like I was precious. Like I could ruin him. My throat tightened slightly. In my dreams, I had never paid attention to Spencer. Even after my death, he had only silently stayed by my side while everyone else moved on.
I had been too stupid then.
Slowly, I loosened my grip around his neck. "If this bothers you," I whispered, "I can get down." The moment I said that, Spencer opened his eyes. There was something dark swirling inside them now. His fingers pressed harder against my waist. "You think I'd let you climb into my arms," he said slowly, "and then calmly let you leave?" My breathing faltered. The next second, his phone vibrated again on the desk. "Andrew." The name flashed brightly across the screen. The atmosphere instantly shattered. Spencer's jaw tightened. Meanwhile, my own emotions cooled down rapidly as well.
Right.
Andrew still existed. The man I had liked for over 10 years. The man who thought I would cry and beg after he confessed to another girl. The man who was currently searching for me everywhere. I suddenly felt exhausted. Spencer noticed my expression change immediately. His arms loosened slightly. "You still like him?" he asked. The question was calm, but something inside it made my chest ache. I lowered my eyes. "In the past, yes. And now?" I stayed silent for 2 seconds before quietly answering, "I don't know." Spencer laughed softly, but there was no amusement in it. "You don't know," he repeated. Then he suddenly lifted me off his lap and set me down onto the bed. "Sleep," he said flatly. My heart panicked for no reason. "Spencer." He turned his chair around and sat with his back facing me. "I'm afraid if you keep looking at me like that," he said coldly, "I'll really lose control." The tips of my ears instantly turned red. I obediently lay down under his blanket after that. The room fell quiet. Only the sound of keyboard tapping and rainfall remained. I thought I would not be able to sleep, but perhaps because the room smelled like Spencer, or perhaps because this was the first peaceful night I'd had in a very long time, my eyelids gradually grew heavy. Half asleep, I suddenly heard movement beside me. Then warmth covered my exposed legs. Spencer had pulled the blanket higher for me. I cracked my eyes open slightly. The desk lamp was still on. Spencer was no longer gaming. Instead, he was sitting quietly beside the bed looking at me. The moment he realized I was awake, his expression immediately turned indifferent again. "Go back to sleep." "Why aren't you sleeping?" "I will later." I stared at him sleepily. "Spencer."
What?
"In my dreams," I murmured softly, "you looked really sad." His entire body stiffened. Probably because my words made no sense. But I was already too sleepy to explain further. I reached out unconsciously and lightly hooked my finger around his sleeve. "Don't be sad anymore," I whispered. Spencer lowered his gaze to my hand. For a very long time he said nothing. Finally, he gently held my fingers in return.
His palm was warm and dry.
"Okay," he answered quietly. The next morning, I was awakened by loud banging on the dorm door. "Spencer, open the damn door." Andrew's voice. The pounding on the door grew louder. "Spencer, I know you're in there." I jolted awake completely. The hand that had still been loosely holding Spencer's sleeve immediately withdrew beneath the blanket. Spencer stood up calmly, though the corners of his mouth had already flattened. He glanced at me. "Stay there." Then he walked to the door and opened it only halfway. Andrew was standing outside with several friends behind him. The moment the door opened, Andrew frowned. "You took forever." Spencer leaned against the door lazily. "Some people sleep at night." Andrew's gaze swept past him into the room. "Someone said they saw Kaylee enter this building last night." Spencer replied expressionlessly, "A lot of people are blind." Andrew's brows furrowed harder. Normally, he would have already left by now. But perhaps because I had not contacted him at all after yesterday, an inexplicable irritation had been festering inside him all night. It made him unable to sit still. One of the boys behind him suddenly laughed. "Andrew, didn't you say she'd definitely come crying by tonight? Maybe she really did give up this time." "That's impossible," another chimed in immediately. "Kaylee likes Andrew so much, She practically worships him. Andrew subconsciously glanced past Spencer again. Then his eyes suddenly narrowed. On Spencer's chair sat my bag, the one I always carried around. The corridor instantly fell silent. Andrew's expression darkened. Why is Kaylee's bag here? Spencer didn't even look back. She left it here before. Move. Andrew shoved the door. But Spencer grabbed the edge of it before he could enter. The two of them stared at each other. The atmosphere instantly became tense.
What?
Spencer asked coolly. Andrew's voice turned cold too. You're stopping me over a bag? Spencer smirked faintly. You barging into my room this early in the morning over a girl you just rejected yesterday is pretty funny too. The people behind Andrew immediately exchanged awkward glances. Because it was true. Andrew had confessed to Sienna publicly yesterday. Yet today he was here searching for me like this. Andrew's jaw tightened. She's emotional. If something happens to her, her family will blame me. Spencer's eyes turned mocking. So now you care? Andrew's face instantly sank. Before the atmosphere could worsen further, I suddenly pushed the blanket aside and got out of bed. Stop arguing. The moment my voice sounded, everyone outside froze. Andrew looked past Spencer sharply. Then his pupils contracted. Because I was wearing Spencer's oversized black hoodie. My bare legs were visible beneath it, and my long hair was still slightly messy from sleep. It was obvious at one glance that I'd spent the night here. The corridor became deathly quiet. Even the expressions on Andrew's friends' faces changed. Andrew stared at me for several seconds without speaking. Then his eyes slowly reddened with anger. Kaylee, he said through clenched teeth, what are you doing here? I looked at him calmly.
Sleeping.
His face darkened completely. With him? Yes. The atmosphere instantly exploded. Holy shit. Kaylee actually stayed overnight in Spencer's room? No way. Andrew suddenly laughed. But there was no warmth in it at all. Very good, he said coldly. So, this is your new trick? I frowned slightly. It's not a trick. You disappeared all night just to stay in another guy's dorm after I confessed. What else should I call this? His voice became sharper and sharper. You're doing this to provoke me? For the first time, I felt genuinely tired hearing him speak. Even now, Andrew still believed the center of my world revolved around him, as if everything I did had to be connected to him somehow. I looked at him quietly. Andrew, I asked softly, do you know what the difference is between you and Spencer? Andrew froze. Meanwhile, Spencer, who had remained silent the entire time, suddenly looked at me too. I smiled faintly. When I stood in the rain yesterday, you told me not to make a scene. When Spencer saw me standing in the rain, he brought me home. The corridor fell silent again. Andrew's expression stiffened slightly. I continued calmly. When I cried before, you thought I was troublesome. But Spencer asked me why I was crying. Even after rejecting me, you still expected me to wait for you like before. I looked straight into his eyes. But Spencer never once treated my feelings like a joke. Andrew's face turned pale little by little. Probably because this was the first time in over 10 years that I had not looked at him with admiration in my eyes. Instead, I looked disappointed. He suddenly felt an unfamiliar panic in his chest. Kaylee, he said instinctively, I didn't mean. Andrew. A soft female voice interrupted him. Everyone turned. Sienna stood at the end of the corridor holding breakfast. Her expression was slightly pale as she looked between me and Andrew. Then at Spencer behind me. The atmosphere instantly became even more awkward. Andrew's expression changed slightly. Meanwhile, I suddenly found the entire situation absurdly funny. Yesterday, he had publicly confessed to another girl while waiting for me to cry over him. And today, he was standing outside another man's room questioning me like an angry boyfriend. I suddenly laughed. Andrew stared at me blankly. Because for the first time, my smile toward him no longer contained any love at all. Andrew stood frozen in the corridor. That tiny trace of panic in his eyes finally turned real. Because he realized something terrifying. I truly did not love him anymore. Sienna's fingers tightened slightly around the breakfast she was holding. Even she could sense it now. The girl who had chased Andrew for over 10 years had finally stopped looking at him. And once that devotion disappeared, the imbalance between us became painfully obvious. Andrew took a step toward me instinctively. "Kaylee, can we talk?" Before I could answer, Spencer suddenly moved. He stepped in front of me naturally, blocking half of my body behind him. His voice was calm and cold. "She said she's tired." Andrew's gaze instantly sharpened. "You staying out of this now?" Spencer looked at him indifferently. "I was already involved the moment you called me last night, asking where she was." The atmosphere between them became suffocating. The friends watching nearby did not even dare breathe loudly. Everyone knew Andrew and Spencer had always had a strange relationship. Roommates, teammates, brothers in everything except blood. But now, for the first time, there was tension between them because of a girl. And that girl was me. I lightly tugged Spencer's sleeve. "It's okay." Only then did he glance down at me. I looked at Andrew calmly. "There's nothing left to talk about anymore." His expression stiffened. "Kaylee, you got what you wanted," I interrupted softly. "You confessed to the person you liked. I didn't make a scene. I didn't bother you. Isn't this exactly what you wanted?" "That's not. But I got what I wanted too." Andrew suddenly fell silent, because he did not know what I wanted anymore. I looked up at Spencer. After all, Spencer Lithgow was known for being cold-hearted and impossible to approach. But slowly, people started noticing things. Like how Spencer would always bring me breakfast before class. How he silently carried my bag whenever it looked too heavy. How he kept extra candy in his pocket because I was prone to low blood sugar. How whenever I fell asleep during lectures, his jacket would somehow end up draped over me. The cold and untouchable Spencer Lithgow treated me with terrifying levels of care. Meanwhile, Andrew became quieter and quieter. At first, he still acted as though nothing had changed. But habits built over 10 years were difficult to break. He would subconsciously save me a seat during lectures. Buy 2 cups of coffee before realizing there was nobody beside him anymore. Turn around after basketball practice expecting to see me waiting with water in hand. Only to remember, I no longer belonged to him. One rainy afternoon, several months later, I ran into Andrew alone outside the library. He looked thinner than before. His eyes landed on the umbrella Spencer was holding over my head. Then on the ring on my finger. His voice came out hoarse. "You're really together now?" I glanced at Spencer instinctively. Spencer lowered his eyes and adjusted my scarf carefully before answering for me. "Yes." Andrew's face paled slightly. He stared at me for a long time. Finally, he laughed bitterly. "I used to think you'd follow me forever." I smiled faintly. I used to think so too. Rain drizzled quietly around us. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Spencer suddenly wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "We're leaving." I nodded immediately. As we brushed past Andrew, he suddenly called out softly behind me. "Kaylee." I paused. I'm sorry. Those words had come far too late. But strangely enough, hearing them now no longer hurt me. I turned around and smiled politely. "It's okay." Because I had already met someone better. Someone who would walk into the rain for me instead of waiting for me to drown in it. 2 years later, the wedding caused a sensation across the entire city. Not because of how luxurious it was, but because the groom was Spencer Lithgow. The Spencer Lithgow who had once rejected countless admirers without a second glance. Yet during the ceremony, his gaze never left me for even a moment. When the officiant asked whether he accepted me as his wife, Spencer answered without hesitation, "I do." His voice was low and steady, but his eyes were slightly red. Only I knew why. Because in another life, he had once stood beside my grave alone. Now he was finally standing beside me instead. At the banquet, someone asked Spencer when he had started liking me. Spencer lowered his gaze toward me quietly. Then he answered, "The first time she came to our dorm looking for Andrew." Everyone looked shocked, including me. Spencer lightly intertwined our fingers. "She smiled at me once," he said calmly. "I liked her for 10 years after that." My eyes instantly turned hot. Meanwhile, across the banquet hall, Andrew sat silently with a wine glass in hand. He watched Spencer lower his head to kiss me gently, watched me smile happily in another man's arms. In the end, he laughed softly and drained the wine in one gulp. This time, the person left behind was him,